Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into something timeless: long sleeves of flowing hanbok robes. The scent of pine smoke curling through mist, and the soft clink of porcelain echoing inside a quiet courtyard. You're stepping into the world of Joseon Dynasty tea masters, where mornings begin not with caffeine chaos, but with reverence, precision, and just a pinch of obsession. There's a fire to coax, steam to study, and a whole lot of not speaking to master. You'll need all 5 senses plus your 6th one. Patience. You're probably not going to survive this if you think tea time means slapping a tea bag into a mug and nooking it for 2 minutes. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where we're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive before the sun does, your sandals padding quietly over slate tiles still cool from the night. The mountain mist hasn't burned off yet. It curls low, wrapping itself around the stone courtyard of the tea pavilion like it, too, is eager to watch. The master's already awake. Of course he is. He's kneeling on a thin mat, his back as straight as the pine trees stacked neatly beside him. He doesn't look at you, doesn't speak, just slides open a low wooden box and selects the first few twigs of the day. They're thin, resin-rich branches he clipped himself, chosen not only for their burn but their scent. You crouch beside the tiny clay stove. No matches here, just flint and cotton. It takes you longer than you'd like, and the master doesn't help. Not because he's cruel, but because this part is the help. The patience, the fumbling, the trying again. It's part of waking up, part of the ceremony. Finally, a flame. The pine twigs crackle with an almost musical pop. The smoke that rises isn't harsh. It's gentle, woody, clean. It smells like temples in winter and someone you trust. There's no hurry to boil water. That would miss the point. The kettle, handmade from iron with a fat, round belly and a spout like a bird's beak, is filled slowly with spring water drawn from the estate well before dawn. Not all water is the same. Everyone in the room knows this. You're told with a look, not words, that rainwater is too soft, river water too wild. But deep well water? That's tempered. Mature. The master finally speaks. The fire's breathing now, he says. So should you. And you do. Slowly. In through your nose. Out through your mouth. The morning air is cool and pine-tinged. There's a rooster somewhere off in the village, sounding aggressively wide awake. A cicada tries its best to join the choir, but is promptly ignored. As the kettle begins to hum, the master opens a wooden drawer built into the pavilion's floor. Inside, wrapped in dark silk, are his tools: tongs, ladle, tea scoop, and a brush with bristles so soft it looks like it belongs in a calligraphy set, not a tea room. Each item is handled like an old friend. You follow his lead. There's no checklist, but you begin to sense a rhythm. Fire, water, breath, brush. He doesn't tell you what to do. You feel it. Like when it's your turn to hand him the scoop. Or when it's not. You get it wrong once. Your hand moves a fraction too soon. The master raises an eyebrow, not unkindly. Still asleep, he says with a slight smile. Then nothing more. Historians still argue whether Joseon tea masters borrowed more from Zen Buddhism or local Confucian traditions, especially in the way they infused meaning into silence. But either way, this room is fluent and quiet. A rustle of robes, a clink of porcelain. These are your conversation partners now. In time, the water boils not with a loud rumble, but a soft, whirling whisper. The master listens, literally. He leans in and tilts his head slightly. There are 3 recognized stages of the boil in this tradition. crab eyes, fish eyes, and raging torrent. Only one of them is right for this tea, and it's definitely not the third. You're offered the honor of the first pour into the warming bowl. Not over the leaves yet. You tremble. You spill. Not much, but enough to leave a drop trailing down the kettle's spout like a falling tear. The master says nothing, just reaches for a cloth and dabs it away. Water always finds its own path, he murmurs. Outside, the sun is finally rising. A soft orange light spills over the edge of the wall, catching the sheen of the teacups lined up on a lacquered tray. Each cup is different. Hand-thrown, slightly imperfect. One has a chip. Another has a hairline crack sealed with golden lacquer. You ask about it, Kintsugi? You guess. The master shakes his head. Japanese. A pause. But still beautiful. Here's your first quirky tidbit of the night. Joseon tea masters sometimes kept cracked cups on purpose, believing their flaws reminded guests to savor impermanence. One even wrote a short poem dedicated to a cup he shattered and then buried under his favorite persimmon tree. The steam thickens. It curls around your hands, your cheeks, your eyelashes. You haven't even tasted the tea yet, and you already feel quieter, centered, like your bones have been soaked in warm pine water. You're not sure how long you've been sitting here. 30 minutes? An hour? Time in this room feels looser, like the drawstring on your robe. The master finally lifts the lid from the tea caddy. A faint, earthy fragrance escapes sun-dried leaves with hints of grass, stone, and something you can't name but suddenly miss. Now, he says, we begin. You don't realize it at first, but the kettle is speaking. Not with words. Obviously it's not enchanted, though you wouldn't be shocked at this point, but with tiny, bubbling whispers. The tea master inclines his head slightly, eyes half closed, and murmurs, "Fish eyes." You lean in. The surface of the water is just starting to shimmer, small bubbles forming around the edge like little glass beads. Not a rolling boil, not even a full simmer, just breathing water, gentle, expectant. Joseon tea masters didn't time their water with clocks. They listened. The way steam curled upward, the pitch of the bubbling, the sound of droplets hitting the inner lid. These were their seconds and minutes. Their tea timer was the soul of the fire, and the breath of the water. Now comes the warm-up. Not for you, well, yes, you're already sweating, but for the cups. The master picks up the kettle with a cloth-wrapped hand and pours hot water into each of the waiting porcelain bowls. Not to brew yet. This is just to wake the cups. They're chilled from the morning air, and you wouldn't pour delicate tea into a cold vessel. That would be rude. Almost violent. As the cups steam, he twirls each one gently in his palm, letting the heat spread through its walls. You copy him, carefully. Your fingers tingle. But you don't drop it this time. Progress. Mainstream fact time. The Joseon Dynasty, which spanned from 1392 to 1897, placed enormous emphasis on Confucian ideals: harmony, restraint, and discipline. Tea was not indulgence. It was expression, a way to reflect your inner order, to bring stillness into a world of constant noise. In court rituals, tea could signify diplomacy, mourning, or filial piety. You weren't just drinking. You were demonstrating who you were. The water is poured out. Not wasted. No water in this room is wasted, but gently returned to the bowl below the preparation table, which now smells faintly of warm earth and iron. Now comes the leaf. The master takes a long, thin scoop carved from bamboo and slides it across the surface of the tea caddy. The leaves are small, twisted, and pale green. You expect a handful. Instead, he takes exactly 3 scoops, then pauses, looks at you. Tea needs space, he says. Don't crowd it. Like guests who've been invited over. not shoved into a room together. Okay, that makes sense. And it's also probably how you should handle most social events. The leaves go into the warmed bowl, and now the water. It's not just dumped in. No. It's ladled. Slowly. A round bronze ladle is used to scoop the now ready water from the kettle. You can see the master watching the steam. Not too hot. Not too cool. A temperature that stills your fingers without burning them. You've heard of green tea. Maybe you've had a matcha latte once, ordered with oat milk and some faint sense of adult responsibility. But this is different. These leaves don't foam. They unfurl. They bloom. The water hits them, and they twist upward like they're waking up from a nap they've earned. And then, nothing. No swirling. No stirring. The tea rests. Let it breathe, the master says, brushing away a thread of steam with one delicate motion. This part is important. Let it tell you what it wants to be. Honestly, that's better advice than most self-help books. A fringe tidbit for you. Some Joseon tea masters believe tea had moods. Not just flavor profiles moods. Some would even apologize to their guests if the leaves came out bitter, blaming the wind direction or the tension of the host. There's an old phrase, almost whispered like a superstition. The tea knows who you are. After a minute, maybe more, maybe less. Time is weird in here. The master picks up the first cup, pours a small stream of golden green liquid, about the color of fresh hay, into each vessel. The aroma is grassy, faintly nutty, clean, not floral, not sweet, something ... alive. You're not told to drink. You're told to look. At the clarity, the surface tension. You tilt your head just slightly. There's a shimmer, a kind of light, dance across the liquid, like it's remembering sunlight. Only then are you told to lift the cup. Not with one hand, but two. Cradle it, like something borrowed and priceless. You breathe in not a sniff, but a long, slow inhale that passes through you like memory. The scent isn't strong. It single quotes S. reserved, like a guest who speaks softly but always says, something worth hearing. You sip, carefully. The liquid is warm, not hot. It coats your tongue in layers. The first taste is almost grassy, then a note of chestnut, then something sharp, mineral, like licking clean riverstone. Again, the master says. You sip again. This time you catch something else bitterness, but not unpleasant. More like clarity. Like a bell sound, last time. This sip is the most delicate. You barely notice it going down. It's just ... there. And then not ... this, you're told, is the way of hot water, the philosophy that a single element, mastered with awareness, can reveal an entire world. The tea, in this tradition, isn't made. It's invited, allowed, drawn out by fire, time, breath, and a listening spirit. Historians still debate whether this three-sip technique was codified as part of formal court tea rituals, or if it developed more among hermit scholars seeking solace in nature. Either way, it's been passed down through generations, surviving even when wars tried to erase subtleties from culture. You set the cup down. Your fingers linger on the ceramic. The warmth is fading, but the calm is not. Outside, the mist is fully burned away. The pine trees stand tall in full morning sun. A light breeze brushes through the pavilion, lifting the edge of your sleeve. Good tea, the master says, not smiling, but clearly pleased. Now we can begin. The porcelain clinks gently as you gather the used cups, careful not to chip or crack them. That would be catastrophic. Not just embarrassing, catastrophic. See, in the Joseon tea world, every cup isn't just a vessel. It's a story, a philosophy, and occasionally a generational family member. You don't just hold it, you honor it. The master beckons you toward the side shelf where several more cups are lined up. Not in military order, mind you. They seem to rest more like sleeping birds, turned ever so slightly in different angles, each resting in a small wooden saucer, some with age-softened cotton beneath to cradle their imperfect bases. He gestures to one with a fine crack running down its side, sealed with shimmering gold. That one, he says. It belonged to my teacher's teacher, dropped by accident during a lightning storm. You blink, and it wasn't thrown away? He gives a soft, horrified chuckle. Why throw away something that learned to survive? That one sentence kind of ruins you, in a good way. This practice, similar to the Japanese kintsugi, but with its own Joseon flair, treated cracks not as flaws, but as calligraphy marks on time itself. Cups were repaired using a blend of resin and powdered, minerals often gold or ash, and then returned to service with even more respect. One tea master reportedly even preferred cracked cups, claiming they taught humility to the lips. You select a cup. It's small, wide-mouthed, and pale jade in color. Not flashy, not loud, just ... content. The master nods. Good choice. That one pours forgiveness. No pressure. Porcelain in the Joseon era, especially the famed Baekja whiteware, wasn't simply utilitarian. It reflected Confucian values, clean lines, modest designs, and an unspoken elegance that didn't beg for attention. The most prized pieces weren't those with ornate decorations, but those that felt effortless. A cup that almost seemed inevitable in its form. Porcelain is like a person, the master says. You don't always notice the strongest ones. The tea caddy returns. This time, it's a darker leaf-aged, curled tightly into almost pebble-like knots. You learn this batch is from a different region, grown under more shaded canopies, picked later in the season. The result? A deeper brew, richer, one that might whisper regrets. As the master puts it, the ritual continues. Warm the bowl, scoop the leaves, judge the steam, but you notice something shifting. The rhythm's changed, slightly slower, more contemplative. The tea's taking up more space somehow. Every tea has its tempo, the master says as he stirs the fire slightly. Fast tea is for anxious people. We don't serve that here. The ladle dips again, this time with an even more cautious hand. The water hovers before falling, a lazy ribbon over the waiting leaves. No splashing, just settling. You ask whether every tea master had their own style, their own tweaks on the process. He nods. Of course. Some preferred spring rainwater. Some used porcelain from different regions. Some even sang while pouring. He pauses, thinking. Mine used to whistle. Off-key, always, but the leaves liked it. Quirky tidbit of the night? One tea master was rumored to time his pours to the chirps of a specific cricket species native to his garden. If the chirping sped up, he'd pause and wait, believing the tea would become uncooperative if poured during frantic moments. Was it superstition? Possibly. Was the tea better? Strangely, yes. This round of tea is thicker in taste, toasty. There's even a faint note of charcoal and plum. It settles low in your throat, grounding you. The warmth spreads to your toes, your fingertips. Now you see, the master says, setting down his cup, why porcelain must be thin. Not just for elegance, but for heat. If it's too thick, the tea becomes dull. If it's too thin, it cools too fast. Balance. It's not just in the cups. The table you sit at? Hand-playing to exact proportions. No nails, no flashy finish. Just wood joined with care. You run your palm across it. Smooth from generations of use, not sandpaper. This moment tea cooling, porcelain clinking. Your breath sinking with steam, it's hard to describe. The world outside doesn't feel real. Like it's paused. Like time is dripping slower than usual. The master's eyes flick toward the entrance of the room. A faint breeze stirs the hanging scroll near the doorway. It depicts bamboo, arcing gracefully across aged paper. "Tomorrow we'll use the tall cups," he says. "For flower tea. The fragrance needs height." You nod, not quite understanding, but willing to trust. Of course, tea has altitude preferences. Why wouldn't it? Historians still argue whether these porcelain rituals were restricted to the Yangban aristocracy, or shared more widely across literate scholars and retired officials. Some scrolls show farmers serving tea on earthenware during seasonal festivals, while palace records detail elaborate ceremonies using imperial-grade vessels kept in hidden boxes. The truth is probably somewhere in between, like most things in Joseon life, layered and coded. You start to rise to clean up, but the master waves you off. "Sit. Let the warmth stay a while." You do. Your cup, now empty, still radiates faint heat. The crack down its side glimmers softly in the morning light dot in a world obsessed with newness, perfection, and polish. You're suddenly sitting with a cup that survived a lightning storm, and that somehow feels more like a mentor than a teacup, porcelain, and patience. Not just tools, teachings. The next tea isn't green, nor oolong, nor something with a name you'd see on a supermarket shelf. No, this one is a blend of dried chrysanthemums and something that smells faintly like old books left in the sun. The master simply calls it autumn memory. You have questions. You do not ask them. He pulls out a bamboo whisk, not the matcha kind with stiff tines, but one that looks more like a small, handcrafted broom. "Made this one myself," he says, inspecting the bristles. "Took 4 tries. The first 3 became kindling." You smile, but he doesn't, which makes it funnier. The chrysanthemum petals are pale, yellow, and brittle, like ancient confetti. They're kept in a lacquered box beside an assortment of dried herbs, jujube slivers, thin ginger shavings, a dark root you don't recognize. The master selects a few ingredients with the same precision a calligrapher uses to select their first stroke. "This tea is not for clarity," he says, spreading the petals onto a square of silk. "It's for softness." There's a quiet ritual to preparing herbal blends. No steeping just yet. First, the petals are gently rubbed between the palms, not crushed, but awakened. You mimic the motion and catch the scent instantly. Floral, but with a dry sweetness. Like the air before rain dot, then comes the whisking. The bamboo whisk dips into a shallow bowl with warm, not hot water. Just enough to coax the aromas from the herbs. The motion isn't brisk. It's slow, circular, meditative. Like stirring your thoughts without needing to sort them. Always in circles, the master murmurs. No corners in this tea. Historians still argue whether herbal infusions like these were officially part of Joseon tea ceremonies, or if they were a side tradition developed more by women in the inner quarters of noble households. Some documents hint at court ladies creating their own flower teas for private rituals, but formal Confucian scholars often dismissed anything too fragrant as frivolous. Of course, the master just shrugs at all this. Who decides what's proper? He asks, lifting the whisk and tapping it once against the bowl's edge. The tea or the person holding the bowl? You're about to respond with something deep, maybe even poetic, when he adds dryly, "Because I've met plenty of idiots with scrolls." Touchy acute dot. You bring the bowl to your nose and inhale. The scent is unlike anything before. A little musky, a little floral, faintly medicinal, in that cozy grandmother's remedy way. It's warm without heat, sweet without sugar dot. The first sip is soft, and you don't just taste it, you feel it. In your chest, in your jaw, like a sigh becoming liquid. The second sip, even more so. And with the third, something shifts. You feel dot 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 slower, not in a drowsy way. More like you've been carrying invisible weight, and now you've set it down without realizing it. The master, meanwhile, is writing. You hadn't even seen him pull out the brush, but there it is, fine hairs dancing across rice paper as black ink blooms into characters. You lean closer, careful not to disturb the surface tension of your tea. It's a poem about your first sip, he says without looking up. You glance at him. Really? No, he says, still writing. It's about a goose. That earns your first laugh in this otherwise reverent space. He doesn't smile, but you catch the ghost of one in the corners of his mouth. Fringe tidbit, some Joseon tea masters composed impromptu poetry based on the tea they served, and expected their guests to do the same. It wasn't competitive, exactly, but there was quiet judgment. One nobleman once stormed out of a ceremony because someone compared plum blossom tea to chewed bark on a rainy morning. In fairness, that guy was also known for getting into an argument with a rock. The master finally sets down his brush and reaches for a small jade seal. He presses it into a shallow pot of red ink and stamps the corner of the paper with a satisfying THW up dot. You peer over. The calligraphy is beautiful, even if you don't understand the full meaning. A few characters leap out. Petal, evening, breath. There's a balance to the lines, a rhythm that mirrors the one you felt in your cup. This, he says, is how you know a tea is good. When it writes itself. The wind outside picks up slightly, rustling the hanging reeds outside the pavilion. You hear the soft click of a wind chime bamboo tubes, knocking against each other like gossiping old uncles. The master begins preparing a second round of the herbal blend, this time adding a twist of citrus peel, so thin it's practically translucent. You ask about it. Balance, he says. Too much flour, and the tea starts dreaming. You need something to bring it back. He pauses, letting the steam rise from the bowl in long curling ribbons. Dreaming tea has its place, he adds, but not in the morning. You sip again. This round is brighter, still gentle, but with a note of citrus that opens your throat, like birdsong in warm air. You find yourself not wanting to speak, not even to compliment the taste. You just want to be here, to keep sipping until the cup is part of your hand. Outside, the sun has reached its peak. Light floods the stone tiles, throwing soft shadows across the tatami mats. The warmth in the room changes deeper, more golden. You don't feel sleepy, exactly, but stilled, settled, like your heart rate has dropped 10 beats without permission. The master finally speaks again, voice lower now. Bamboo and chrysanthemum. One bends, one blooms, one listens, one sings. You tilt your head. Which is the tea? He smiles for real this time. Exactly. 3 breaths. That's what the master says before you touch the next cup. 3 breaths, then sip, he repeats, setting the vessel in front of you like an offering. The tea needs a moment, and so do you. You nod, then promptly forget how to breathe. The cup in front of you is unlike the others. Taller, narrower. Its sides are etched with a faint design, pine needles and cranes. Perhaps, though time has worn the lines to a whisper. The surface is warm, the porcelain thin. This tea is darker, almost amber in color, and a faint curl of steam dances from the surface like incense escaping a temple burner. First breath, in through your nose, deep and slow. The aroma floods you, earthy, woodsy, slightly bitter, like roasted barley. The kind of scent that settles in your chest and reminds you of fall, of old libraries, of paper. Second breath, slower, eyes closed. The scent changes now. There's something floral, but faint. Not perfumed, just present. A background note of aged plum or dried lily. You can't place it. It doesn't want to be placed. Third breath, steady. A pause. Stillness. You feel your body adjust to the heat in the cup, your hands subtly loosening around the base. Your shoulders drop. The world narrows to just this tea, this steam, this moment. And then you sip. The tea floods your mouth with layers. First warm, then bitter, then sweet. Not sugary sweet. More like earned sweetness. Like the kind that follows a long walk or a solved riddle. It lingers, coating your tongue, trickling down like honey over stone. You exhale. You don't realize you've been holding your breath again. The breath, the master says gently, is the fourth ingredient. Fire, water, leaf, and breath. Mainstream historical fact. Many Joseon tea rituals integrated breath control not as a mystical flourish, but as a practical discipline. Scholars and monks alike saw breath as a measure of the mind. Calm breath meant calm thought. The tea ceremony wasn't just a cultural moment. It was meditative training, a preparation for reading, writing, or simply being. This current tea is called Hyeonmicha roasted brown rice tea. Humble, nourishing, and often overlooked by those chasing fancier flavors. But here, in this room, it feels sacred. Toasted rice, fire-kissed and memory-laced. You can taste the soil, the grain, the harvest. You see, the master says, turning the cup gently in his hand, it's not that every tea needs ceremony. It's that every moment deserves it. He pauses. Even burnt rice water. Quirky tidbit for this round. Joseon servants sometimes drank scorched rice water called nurungji cha made from the crust at the bottom of cooking pots. It wasn't part of high tea ceremonies, but tea masters occasionally brewed it deliberately, calling it humility in liquid form. One official even claimed it reminded the tongue not to lie. You sip again. This time slower still. The tea has cooled slightly, and with it, the flavors mellow. Less bite, more roundness. The third sip is even gentler. It almost disappears before it hits your throat. 3 breaths. 3 sips. You wonder if every part of your life should work that way. The master places a fresh cup beside yours. Now watch the steam. You do. It sways, curls, loops upward in slow spirals. Not rushed. Not pulled. Just dancing. Responding to invisible forces. You'll know a bad brew by its steam, he says. If it darts. If it flees. If it doesn't listen. Steam that listens. That's where you are now. This is your new standard for existence. He lets the next few minutes stretch. No new tea? No conversation? Just warmth. Just presence. You notice the little things. The creak of old wood, the flutter of the hanging paper screen, the way your own breathing syncs with the rhythm of the kettle's slow simmer. Historians still debate whether these extended silences during tea were structured parts of the ritual or simply tolerated pauses. Some accounts insist on strict sequence steps, gestures, timing, while others describe more flexible moments of wordless presence. Either way, every ceremony carried one unspoken rule. You weren't here to be efficient. You were here to arrive. The master finally breaks the quiet. The problem with most people, he says, is they drink tea like it's soup. Or worse, like coffee. You try not to look guilty. Tea, he continues, wants to be heard. That's why we drink with the mouth closed, so the tongue doesn't interrupt. You laugh softly, but you try it. Another sip, mouth closed. The flavor is different, deeper, somehow. You didn't realize your tongue had an opinion before. Outside, a small bird chirps from the pine tree. Just once. Then silence again. The master stands, stretches one long arm toward the roof beam, then gestures for you to follow him outside. The sun's moved across the courtyard, casting long shadows between the stones. You step out into the light, tea still warm in your belly. You walk in silence, no shoes, just the cool of stone beneath your feet. You pass a row of ginkgo trees' broad leaves, swaying slightly in the wind, yellow, fading. One falls as you watch. Even leaves know when to let go, the master says. But people? Not so much. He bends down, picks up the fallen ginkgo leaf, and places it carefully inside your teacup. To remind you that breath doesn't just enter, he says. It leaves too. Back in the pavilion, you set the cup down. The leaf curls gently at the bottom. You don't need more tea. Not yet. Just 3 more breaths. You barely hear the approach, just a whisper of silk and the soft creak of the outer gate. A visitor. The master rises, not in haste, but with calm gravity, as if the guest's presence had been written in the steam hours ago. You follow, unsure whether to bow, hide, or adjust your hair dot. It's a scholar. Elderly, robed in pale gray, with a scroll tucked under one arm and a walking stick shaped like a dragon's tail. His eyes crinkle at the edges, not from age, but from smiling too much at clever things. The master bows low. So do you, after a heartbeat's delay. Today, the master murmurs to you, we practice the 9 steps. The what now? The 9 steps, as it turns out, is not a dance, but a choreography of movement through the T-space, literally. There are exactly 9 prescribed steps you must take to reach the T-mat from the entrance. They're measured not by actual distance, but by intention. Footfalls like ink strokes, none too rushed, none without form. You attempt them. Step 1. Enter with stillness. Step 2. Greet with the eyes, not the mouth. Step 3. Acknowledge the cups. It goes on. You lose track after step 5 and nearly stub your toe on the edge of the mat. But the master smooths it over with a flick of his sleeve. The scholar is seated now, cross-legged with alarming elegance for someone whose bones probably predate the pavilion. He sets the scroll beside him without a word. You assume it contains poetry, or perhaps an argument with a rival over the phrasing of a Confucian idiom. The tea, selected for this visit, is pale green, picked from high-altitude bushes said to only grow on north-facing slopes. The leaves are small, delicate, and oddly curled like sleeping fish. The master prepares the tray, cups, kettle, bowl, scoop. Every item is wiped, placed, and rotated like a planet entering its orbit. Even the angles matter. The guest must always sit facing the mountain, the master explains quietly. So they remember how small they are. You wonder where that puts you. Facing the courtyard. So you remember what? The kettle begins to hum. Not boil hum. The fire's been gently restoked with pine bark, the smoke minimal, the scent sharp but inviting. The scholar watches it like he's seen it 100 times and still isn't tired of the show. Mainstream historical fact. Formal tea etiquette during the Joseon Dynasty often reflected rigid social hierarchies. Scholars and officials were expected to behave according to strict Confucian norms, including when to speak, where to sit, and how to hold a cup. Even the tilt of your wrist could communicate respect or insult. Tea wasn't just hospitality. It was diplomacy, philosophy, and performance all in one. You pour the first round under the master's supervision. The cups are filled in a specific order: oldest guest first, then the host, then yourself. The pour must be continuous. No shaking, no dribbling. It's like threading water through air. The scholar lifts his cup with 2 hands and sips. A moment passes. Then he exhales with a low, satisfied hum. Ah, this is tea that remembers how to walk. The master nods, pleased. They begin talking, softly at first, in the winding, elliptical way only old friends can. Names are mentioned. Events from 40 years ago. One of them once debated a royal librarian over whether plum blossoms grieve. You have no idea what that means. The conversation drifts toward poetry. The scholar recites a verse from memory, something about moonlight and cracked porcelain, then asks the master to respond with a line of his own. He does. And just like that, they're dueling with metaphors. You sit wide-eyed, cup in hand, like someone who accidentally walked into a fencing match and got handed a feather. The scholar pauses, mid-poem, and looks at you. What does your tea say today? You freeze. Words flee. The cup feels suddenly too hot, your tongue too slow. But the master gives you a look. Not a warning, more like encouragement, wrapped in irony. So you take a breath. 3 of them, in fact. You look at your cup, at the floating leaf, at the light on the surface, and you say, it says the fire has a memory. The scholar blinks, then smiles. Good. A little cryptic. Slightly pompous. Perfect. They nod, and you breathe again. A quirky tidbit. In some Joseon tea gatherings, guests were expected to compose spontaneous poems about the tea they drank or the mood it evoked. These were often written on fans, paper scraps, or even leaves. Some were later transcribed into family records. Others vanished into vapor. One noblewoman famously wrote, "My tea tastes like a widow's sigh," and was later married off to a minor prince who reportedly found the line intoxicating. The ceremony concludes with a shared silence. The cups are placed on their saucers, the kettle's lid closed with finality. The scholar rises and bows, not deeply, but meaningfully. 9 steps to enter, he says, but only 1 to leave. He walks out, scroll under his arm, leaving behind a faint whiff of ink and old paper. You turn to the master. He exhales slowly and says, he'll be thinking about that fire line for a week. Historians still argue whether the 9 steps were ever codified formally or simply passed down through apprenticeships in storytelling. Some claim the sequence was designed to test one's readiness to learn. Others believe it was a subtle method to judge social graces. Either way, you've done them now. Even if you forgot number 6. The courtyard is quiet again. The steam rises gently from the leftover kettle, and the hanging scroll sways in the afternoon breeze. You take your cup and sip, just once more. Fire has a memory. And so do you. Evening folds itself softly over the courtyard, wrapping the pine trees in shadows and painting the pavilion in tones of bronze and quiet. The tiles beneath your feet hold on to the warmth of the sun, but the air's taken on that cool edge that makes your sleeves feel suddenly important. You're summoned not by voice, but by the low toll of a hanging bell. A single note. Short, clear, and somehow ... expectant. The master stands by the fire pit now. It's been moved outdoors, ringed by stones, its flames already murmuring to the night. A few new items have appeared. A taller kettle, a low lacquered tray, a bundle of incense sticks wrapped in silk, and most curiously small rice cakes shaped like foxes. He gestures. You follow. This ceremony is for the unseen guests, he says, kneeling on a fresh mat. And they're always punctual. Tonight's ritual is different. Slower, heavier. You sense it before anything is even brewed. The air feels thick with waiting, as if the courtyard has inhaled but hasn't exhaled yet. This isn't tea for conversation. This is tea for remembrance. Ancestral tea, the master says. Moonlight brewing. And offerings, of course. Even the hungry ghosts appreciate presentation. You blink at that, but he's already unwrapping a bundle of dried herbs and dropping a few petals into the warming bowl lavender. Lotus, a sliver of ginger, and something dark that smells. Ancient, faintly smoky. Almost like parchment. The incense is lit. Not 1 stick, but 3. Placed in a triangle. The scent creeps in slowly. All cedar and ash, and something you can't place like old rainwater stored in a lacquer box. The smell is important. He adds, almost to himself. If they don't like it, they won't come close. You glance around. The ancestors, he says plainly, seeing your look. And the others? Right. Mainstream historical fact. Ancestor veneration was central to Joseon Confucian life. Offerings of food, incense, and tea were common during Jessa ceremonies, often conducted on death anniversaries or festival days. But outside the formal indoor rites, some households, and particularly reclusive tea masters, developed private night rituals blending Confucian devotion with more folkloric traditions. These were quieter, more personal, less structured, but no less sincere. The fire crackles softly as the kettle heats. No pine twigs this time. Tonight, it's oak. Slower to light, more even in burn. The master explains that oak flames burn with memory, which sounds poetic until he casually adds that it's also harder to mess up the water temperature. The moon rises, pale and distant. Its reflection shimmers faintly in the bowl of clean water set beside the fire, which is not for brewing. It's for them, the unseen ones. Spirits, ancestors, family long gone. That water stays untouched. A mirror for the dead. Quirky tidbit. In some parts of Joseon, Korea, it was believed that spirits traveled along the scent of steam and incense. That's why some tea masters brewed outdoors on certain nights, so the vapor could reach skyward without obstruction. One particular tea poet swore he saw his grandfather's face in the kettle's steam. Another master refused to brew under full moons, claiming the dead spoke too loudly during them. He also never married. Probably unrelated, the tea tonight is poured into 4 cups, though only 2 are occupied. The other 2 rest beside the incense, one with a small fox-shaped rice cake tucked beside it, the other with a faint thumbprint on the rim, as if someone long gone had already arrived. No one speaks. Not for a long time. You sip slowly. The flavor is delicate lavender rising first, and ginger's warmth settling low in your chest. The tea feels like dusk tastes, like stories that end with ellipses instead of periods. The master finally lifts one of the unclaimed cups, holds it out toward the shadows, then pours its contents into the earth beside the fire. For those who didn't make it home, he says quietly, you do the same with your second pour. The soil drinks it in without protest. Historians still debate whether these moonlight offerings were acts of devotion or simple superstition. Some argue they were remnants of shamanistic practices that lingered quietly under Confucian roofs. Others insist they were just poetic gestures, symbolic acknowledgments that the world was not made of flesh alone. Either way, they were deeply personal. You didn't do them for others to see. You did them so you didn't forget. The fox rice cakes are shared, half left by the incense, half eaten slowly. Their bean paste centers warm from the fire. The master chuckles at your surprise. Yes, the fox cakes are real, he says. No, they don't bite back. You raise an eyebrow. Usually, he adds, without further explanation. The fire dims. The incense dies. The bowls are cleaned in silence, and the moon climbs higher, bathing the pavilion in silver light. You feel the weight of something unspoken sorrow, maybe, or gratitude, or just the kind of quiet that comes when you stop performing and simply exist. As you gather your mat, the master stops you. Take one for the road, he says, handing you an extra rice cake. You never know who'll need it. You slip it into your sleeve without a word. The last thing you see as you leave the courtyard is the bowl of moonlit water still untouched, still reflecting, still waiting. The next morning greets you with the smell of scorched barley and a mild crisis. You were meant to light the fire today, and you did. A little too well. There's a blackened ring around the kettle and a trail of barley kernels that look more like coal than grain. You tried to brush it off, literally and emotionally. The master approaches, eyeing the charred remains with a neutral expression that could mean anything from I expected this, to you've dishonored 5 centuries of tradition. He crouches, prods the debris with a thin iron skewer, then says, "Ah, the ceremony of errors." You freeze. That's a real thing? Of course, he says. You think we never spill? He stands, brushing soot from his robe, and begins preparing a new batch of tea, like nothing happened. You're still holding the burnt barley, like a child who broke the only toy they weren't supposed to touch. Today's lesson, he says, is about getting it wrong. He invites you to sit, not in the pavilion, but beside the rear stone basin where water collects from a bamboo spout. The setting is humbler. No mats, no porcelain tray. Just the basics. Fire, kettle, and 2 rough clay cups, one chipped, one with a tea stain that looks like a sleeping snake. We don't perform the ceremony at perfection, he says. We perform it toward it. He brews the tea directly over the open flame, not bothering with delicate tools. Just his hands, some water, and a handful of roasted barley, not burnt this time, but properly golden brown. You notice he even uses a cracked scoop. On purpose, maybe, or as a silent nod to solidarity. Mainstream historical fact. Barley tea, or boricha, was the daily drink of choice for many in Joseon, Korea, especially among commoners. Unlike delicate green teas reserved for ceremony, boricha was hearty, forgiving, and brewed in large pots for families or communal gatherings. Monks and scholars appreciated it for its simplicity. Some even called it the tea of forgetting, because it cleared the palate and calmed the nerves. The master pours you a cup. It's cloudy, darker than anything you've had so far. The scent is smoky, earthy, but not unpleasant. More like toasted bread or the inside of an old library. You sip and instantly cough. It's bitter, sharp, not offensive, just honest. No florals to hide behind. No metaphor, just water, grain, and heat. The master watches your expression, then nods. Yes, that's the taste of stubbornness. He means yours. You know it. Tea doesn't always need poetry, he continues. Sometimes it needs a bruise. A quirky tidbit. Some tea masters intentionally taught students through sabotage overheated kettles, mismatched cups, or leaf batches with inconsistent roasts. One master famously served salt water once to prove a point about trust. Another mixed in pine ash and called it impermanence in powder form. It's unclear whether their students appreciated this or plotted revenge through bad haiku. Your master is gentler, mostly. You try again. This time slower. The scoop doesn't spill. The fire stays low. You wait for the bubbles, not the hiss. The barley blooms golden in the water, scent softening. When you pour, your hand is steady. The steam rises straight. He takes a sip, nods, then grins. Still tastes like regret, he says. But better. Historians still argue whether mistakes were ritualized within Joseon tea practice or simply tolerated. Some schools of thought encouraged total control, demanding repetition until the tea was perfect every time. Others, especially among independent scholar hermits, believed that error revealed more about a person's character than any successful ceremony. Perfection hides everything, the master says, echoing that second school. But failure? That reveals your spine. The rest of the morning is devoted to remedial brewing. You make 3 more batches. 1 is too weak. 1 is lukewarm. But the 3rd finally comes close. The scent is full, the color amber, the taste rich, but not overwhelming. You've met the barley now, the master says, emptying his cup. It'll remember you. You smile. Please. Then he adds, so don't burn it again. It holds grudges. The day warms. Bees drift lazily over the low herbs beside the basin. You wipe down the stone with a wet cloth careful to leave no trace of ash. The master hums something tuneless, maybe a folk song, maybe just steam song. You're not told this, but you feel it. This was a rite. A real one. No scrolls or incense. Just the ritual of error and the ceremony of learning. You bow not deep, but enough the master returns it and says, "Next time, I'll let you crack the eggs." You blink. "We're having eggs?" "No," he says, "but you'll probably crack something else." You laugh, and this time, he joins you. The sun climbs high. The shadows fade. The cups, now dry, sit like silent witnesses to the truth every tea drinker eventually learns. You spill. You scorch. You mess up the steps. And still, the tea waits. The next session begins not with fire or water, but with ink. The master has rolled out a fresh sheet of rice paper across the central table and set out 2 brushes, one thick, one thin. He's also prepared an inkstone, already filled with soot-black ink, and a small dish of water warmed just enough to keep your fingers nimble. Today, he says, the tea drinks with the brush. You're confused, of course, but not surprised. By now, if he'd said, "The ladle sings when jealous," you'd probably just nod and ask for the chorus. This is the scholar's tea. Muncha cha. Tea for reading, for writing, for the quiet dance between leaf and language. It's often made with fruit infusions, plum, pear, or citron, to inspire clarity and calm. The kind of tea that softens the mind without dulling it. The master slices a preserved plum with almost surgical precision. He drops 2 thin slivers into a bowl with a few wisps of dried leaves, barely enough to cover the bottom. The aroma is faintly sour, warm, and heady with a ghost of fermented sugar as the kettle hums. He sets the brush into your hand. "No strokes until you sip," he says. Ink without tea is just noise. Mainstream historical fact. Joseon Dynasty scholars often paired tea drinking with calligraphy or poetry. These weren't just leisure activities. They were viewed as moral training. Writing with clarity mirrored thinking with clarity. And tea, especially those brewed with subtle flavors, helped sustain long hours of study and writing during the days of the guabio, the infamously grueling civil service exams. You take your first sip. The tea is surprising sharp, like the start of a thought. Then soft, the plum lingers at the edges of your tongue. There's a hint of bitter herb beneath it, like the underside of an idea you haven't quite finished forming. Then you write. Your first stroke is terrible, uneven, shaky. Ink pools in the corner like a soggy punctuation mark. The master doesn't correct you. He pours another cup instead. Try again. But let the tea guide the weight. You breathe, sip, write again. This stroke is steadier, like a gate opening inward. Begin to see the rhythm. Sip, stroke, pause, breathe. The tea cools slightly in the bowl, its fragrance changing, mellowing. So does your brushwork. Your characters grow more confident, more fluid. You're not writing sentences, just fragments, pieces, maybe just impressions. But they feel honest. Quirky tidbit. Some reclusive scholars in the Joseon countryside believed tea had a direct influence on handwriting. One even claimed his calligraphy only improved after switching from ginseng tea to plum, as it soothed his elbows. There's no evidence for this, except his later scrolls, which do look suspiciously elegant. The master paints as well. His strokes are bold but sparse. He writes vertically, with wide spacing, deliberate, restrained, as if each character is taking its time to arrive. You glance over and see the start of a poem forming. Beneath moonlight's ink, tea cools in the hand. Words sip themselves. You can't tell if that's ancient or just composed 10 seconds ago. Either way, it hums. Historians still argue whether tea was more influential on art or philosophy during the Joseon era. Some scholars trace key shifts in Neo-Confucian thought to particular tea-drinking circles, while others point to visual arts painting, calligraphy, ceramics that flourished alongside evolving tea culture. What's certain is that tea wasn't just a drink. It was a companion to expression. Later, as the light slants across the paper and your wrist begins to ache, the master brings out the final flourish. Shaha. Tea sweets. Small, delicately shaped treats served to balance the mouth after the astringency of the brew. These ones are plum paste confections in the shape of tiny books. Yes, really books. You hold one between your fingers, admiring the detail. It even has a faint line of filling along the spine, like a ribbon of ink. These are to eat only when your writing stops making sense, a master says. Which means I need two. You laugh. Eat one. It melts on your tongue, sweet and just a little tart. The way good editing should feel. There's no ceremony to close this session. No bow, no official ending. Just the drying of ink, the emptying of cups, the folding of used paper. The air smells of plum and parchment. The master places your scroll on a wooden rack to dry. Not to keep, just to let it breathe. You leave the room quietly. Not because anyone told you to, but because the tea has already said what needed saying. Back in your quarters, the plum taste lingers. You run your fingers over a small scrap of leftover rice paper and consider writing a line of your own. Something not for critique, not for praise, just for memory. Something like, the tea wrote first. I followed. The sky is pale and quiet now, caught in that soft, breathless space just before dusk, when even the birds stop to listen. You return to the tea courtyard one last time, robes brushed clean, sleeves straightened, but somehow lighter. Not out of duty now, not out of curiosity, just returning. The master is already waiting. Not seated on a mat, not arranging cups. He stands barefoot by the garden's edge, hands behind his back, watching the last light shimmer through the pine boughs. You join him wordlessly. Tonight's tea, he says, will not be tasted. You blink. We brew, he explains, but not to drink. We steep, but only to release. This is the final pour, the letting go. You follow him to the hearth. It's smaller now, coals instead of flame. Just enough heat to coax the last steeping from yesterday's leaves. The same leaves, in fact, the ones you dried, folded, and stored after the ink ceremony. They've softened in the bamboo box overnight, changed somehow. Darker, more fragrant. Ready, he hands you the scoop. You hesitate. Aren't these spent? He nods. So are most people. Still worth listening to. You smile, just a little, and sprinkle the leaves into the bowl. The kettle hisses softly. The water doesn't bubble. It exhales. You pour. The steeping is slow, gentle. The liquid is pale, barely tinted. The leaves float like paper boats on an old pond. There is no ceremony here, no particular order. Just the breath of the leaves, the warmth of the bowl. And your hand steady now and aware. Mainstream historical fact. Final steeps were sometimes part of longer tea rituals, particularly among reclusive monks or older scholars who used these sessions as metaphors for life's last chapters. The final cup wasn't consumed. It was returned to the ground, to the air, to the fire. It symbolized closure, completion without excess. You lift the bowl, feel its heat in your palms, and hold it toward the garden. The master pours a second bowl, not for himself, but for the wind. No words are spoken. Then you pour the tea out. Not roughly, not thoughtlessly, slowly, like you're pouring a goodbye. The liquid seeps into the earth at your feet, soaking into the roots of the ginkgo tree that stood here longer than the both of you. The soil drinks it like memory, gratitude, the master says softly. to the fire, to the water, to the leaves, and the silence, you add? He nods. There's a final task cleaning the tools. Not as an afterthought, but as a meditation. Each piece washed gently, dried with care. The ladle gets its own cloth. The kettle, its own rest. Even the scoop is tapped once before being returned to its box. As if the wood needs to know it's done for the day. A quirky tidbit. Some Joseon tea masters were known to speak aloud to their tools, especially at the end of long ceremonies. You poured well today, they'd say to the ladle. You listened kindly to the cup. A few were even rumored to name their teapots. One famously called his little emperor of steam. Arrogant pot, apparently. The master hands you a cloth and gestures toward the cups. You dry them one by one, suddenly aware of each curve, each fingerprint worn into the glaze from generations of use. There's a gentle clatter as one cup slips, but you catch it just in time. A gasp escapes you. You expect a sigh, a lecture, but the master just chuckles. Even now, your tea wants to remind you it's alive. Historians still argue whether this final steep, this silent ritual of release, had official status among Joseon tea traditions, or was simply a poetic improvisation. There are no scrolls about it, no diagrams, only a few scattered journal entries, notes on margins, whispers of practice passed hand to hand. But tonight, it feels more real than anything else. The coals dim. The courtyard cools. The tools are clean. The master stretches one arm above his head and sighs. It's enough, he says. You bow. He returns it, a little deeper this time, then walks back into the pavilion, leaving you alone with the hush of dusk, the scent of steeped earth, and the memory of every cup you didn't know you needed. You sit a little longer, then you rise, and you, too, let go. The leaves rest now. Their fragrance softened, their color faded. The fire has long since quieted to a gentle warmth, and the air that once carried steam now holds only stillness. You ease back, arms folded into your sleeves, head tilted toward the sky, where the first stars appear gentle glimmers, like old friends arriving late, but unannounced. The teacups are clean, their rims dry. The kettle sleeps. Even the insects, who chattered so insistently at dusk, seem to sense the hush. You feel the silence stretch, not empty, but full, like a room where nothing more needs saying. Let your shoulders sink. Let your hands relax. Let the last fragments of steam drift out from your thoughts. You've learned the rhythm now, the pauses, the patience, the way each sip invites stillness. You've listened to the water, read the leaves, spilled and brewed again. And all of it was enough. No steps remain, no cups to fill. Just the quiet, just the night. So as your breath slows and the hush wraps itself gently around your ribs, know that the ritual is complete, not just for the tea, but for you. Whatever weight you carried, you've poured it out. Whatever stirred too loudly, you've steeped it into peace. And now the world cools with you. Good night.